Hello there, very good evening and welcome to Government in Transition. I'm your host, Eddy Layne, and I'm joined this evening by Gail Teixeira, executive member of the People's Progressive Party, former minister and a political scientist by training, as well as Sonia Parag, an attorney at law and a candidate of the People's Progressive Party Civic for the March 2nd, 2020 general and regional elections. Gail, Sonia, good evening and welcome to the
Good
program.
evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi,
Good
Sonia.
evening,
Hi,
Eddy,
Eddy.
and good evening, Comrade Gail, and to the
Hi.
viewers.
Thank
So
you.
we're less than 24 hours away from the ruling of the Caribbean Court of Justice. The court is expected to rule tomorrow in that appeal filed by Dr. Irfan Ali and Dr. Barjaglio regarding the Court of Appeals ruling, I think about 2 weeks or so ago. Tonight we want to focus a little bit not only on what will follow in terms of that ruling, but we want to focus a little bit on the desperation of the APNU-AFC cabal leading up to this ruling and the positions that have been taken, like they have taken before when leaders in CARICOM would have spoken out, when the ABC EU countries would have spoken out, when the Commonwealth would have spoken out, when the Organization of American States would have spoken out, where they attempt to, first and foremost, discredit those persons, attack their character, and in some cases, attempting to intimidate those persons. We have seen in the last maybe 72 hours or so, or maybe a little before that, nakedly, the APNU-AFC have launched vile attacks on the Caribbean Court of Justice. And I want to start from that point before we get into the other issues that we have to address, because it seems as though anybody who somehow, and the court has not ruled, that's the funny thing, the court has not ruled, the court has not made known a position, but already you have attempts to assassinate the characters of the judges and the court, and also you have intimidation tactics being used by the coalition, something that the PNC is well known for. Gail, you know more than myself and Sonia about the intimidation, the bullyism, and so forth of the PNC, which is essentially the APNU-AFC. So I'm going to start with you. You've been observing, I'm sure, these attempts at intimidating, bullying the courts.
Well, you know, Eddy, they say that a tiger doesn't change his colors, you know, his spots, his stripes, sorry. The PNC hasn't changed fundamentally, and that's their own downfall from the 1960s, 70s, 80s. They've never gone through a transformation and addressed the way in which they function as a political party. And we have seen in the last, in particular, since they got into government, but more so after the no confidence motion, that they did everything possible to stay in power, regardless of whether it violated the Constitution, the laws of our country, regardless if it was against the wishes of our people. And they have done the same from March the 2nd to attempt on several occasions to steal the elections, and they have failed. As we have pointed out in other programs, Eddy, I think the plan, a conspiracy to win, or to win by rigging, let's put it that way, the 2020 election started long before the no confidence motion. But having been countermanded by the People's Progressive Party, and not only the PPPC, but by the other political parties in opposition, and the observations of the international observers and local observers, they have, I think now they're burnt all their bridges, or most of their bridges, and they're coming down the wire now. And so this is where they're coming down the tail end. I don't think there's much left for them to do. I'm not saying that it's impossible, that they can't do anything, but the legal options that are open, let's clarify that. The legal options available to the APNU-AFC to derail the elections and to be able to install themselves in government illegally or otherwise is running out. All they have left basically is probably one or two more options, and one that we are seeing, on which we'll learn tomorrow what the result of that is at the CCJ. But I mean, the level of bullyism and intimidation, and I haven't seen this type of thing before. It was one thing as Guyanese that the PNC would intimidate us and intimidate the PPP and intimidate anybody who looked as if they were shifting from being PNC. And that's been historic, but I've never seen this kind of onslaught, basically an onslaught against anybody who has criticized them, anybody who said that the winner is the PPC, and their willingness to take on the entire world. It's almost paranoid that they're doing this. And so, I mean, when you listen to the language of Aubrey Norton and I read what he had to say on the TV station, I think Trinidad, then Moses, and then Ramjatan. It's appalling. I was on a program with Moses where he was outrageous. And then we have the ad that was put in Trinidad and on Saturday. And then today, Imran Khan had an article as a columnist in the Jamaica Gleaner. And I think it's even worse than the ad. I think it is really a treacherous piece of writing. And in fact, the court should really hold him in contempt, but I'm not a lawyer. But it is outrageous. And the level of bullyism and intimidation, I think is causing a number of Caribbean people to say, what the devil is this, if this has never happened before? One thing I want to just refer to the past in relation to these intimidation tactics. Every time we've had elections, and the PNC has always, they've lost and they threaten violence and burning and mayhem. And the observers and other people have generally tried to get the elections thing over as quickly as possible. And then we had 2011 where they did the same thing, and where it was a very close race with 4,500 odd votes. And they're the ones who threatened that, 2015, that if they didn't get results quickly, and that was in a matter of 4 days, that they would be burning and looting and so on. So they've always used the intimidation tactics in Guyana against anybody they feel they can frighten, the international observers, the diplomats, etc. And so my concern, and what is very revealing, and I think this is where the desperation is really out of, I've never seen this before, and this will lose them ground, more ground internationally and regionally. I don't think it's going to intimidate people in the CCJ and the judges in the CCJ. I think they're going to be horrified that if they allow this kind of intimidation to happen to them and they buckle to it, this could be really a slap in the face for the CCJ in the future.
Thank you so much, Gail. I'm going to bring you in here, Sonia. Sorry, my audio was muted, so I was busy talking, but nothing was coming through. So I'm going to bring you in here.
That's okay. All right. So the first thing I wanted to say was that I fully endorse as a member of the bar, I fully endorse the statement made by the Bar Association condemning the attacks on the CCJ, on the judges of the CCJ by the APNU-AFC. And I am quite appalled at the new level of low that they have gone. They're really shedding their coat one by one, and it's going to a lower level each time. And it's while it seems to be some form of dementia, it is also unbelievable or incredible to believe that you find persons who are in a professional capacity and they will be acting like this. Now, to attack the CCJ, in which the opposition, when they were the opposition at the time, and the government would have tabled for the CCJ to be the apex court or the highest court of our judicial hierarchy, it was a unanimous decision. And it was a decision that was made on the independence of the country and the sovereignty of the country to allow the CCJ to become our highest court and to pronounce upon matters that the Court of Appeal may have pronounced upon, and give the citizens of Guyana the right to appeal to a higher court. So I find it very appalling. I find the impropriety that they continue to go on with every day is quite disgusting, to say the least. And to attack men of such distinction, men and women rather of such distinction as the Caribbean Court of Justice, is quite frankly absurd. It's not only absurd, but it is ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous for them to do that. And I fully stand with the Bar Association in their condemnation of such attacks on the CCJ. And as Comrade Gail would have said, I have looked at the statement, and what it is that they're trying to not only intimidate the CCJ, which I do believe will not take intimidation at any on any level. They're also trying to influence the CCJ.
Yeah.
And also they're undermining the CCJ. They're trying to undermine, to whichever handful of persons that they have that is still listening to them, undermine the CCJ's ability to administer justice impartially. They're basically telling their supporters, look, the highest court of our judicial system is incapable of making an impartial decision. Although that court has not made that decision, although that court has gone through the correct and appropriate process of allowing each and every attorney, and not to mention that they all took attorneys for outside of Guyana to represent them, and to submit on their behalf. Those were the submissions were presented, and we are now awaiting the decision of the court. There is absolutely not a shred of evidence as to how the Caribbean Court of Justice will rule. So what they're doing they're preempting what they will rule, and then they're also going, and just as Comrade Gail said, I am also disgusted. I'm utterly disgusted with the article that was written by Imran Khan in the Gleaner, basically trying to tell the CCJ, look, I'm a man, I'm just a civil man in Guyana here, and I'm telling you, the CCJ, and you distinguished judges, that you must do what I say. If that isn't bullyism, I don't know what is. But in any event, the Caribbean Court of Justice will not take bullyism. They will not take intimidation. And at no cost will they be undermined, because they have ruled, and they rule upon merits. So the line that they want to carry, that the Caribbean Court of Justice is biased towards the PPPC, is absolute nonsense. The Caribbean Court of Justice is only rule as it relates to meritorious issues.
But I think somehow, I think, Comrade Gail, it is still in the DNA of the PNC, of the whole issue of party paramountcy, where they think that they can just click their fingers and say to the court or to say to any agency, look, this is what I want you to do. So it still remains in them. The problem that they have here, that they're facing here, is that you have a court that has been impartial, fair, and that has been ruling based on the law. So,
Right.
No matter how much they try to intimidate, the Caribbean leaders by saying all sorts of things about them, about talking about
Attacking
banning
them personally.
Yes, and talking about banning Dr. Ralph Gonzalez from coming into Guyana and so forth. But what is the good thing here is that all these threats of leaving the CCJ and all sorts of things, and leaving CARICOM if the CCJ doesn't rule in their favor, is of no value. Thankfully, they will not be in power to effect any, because they have lost the elections, and it's about time they pack up and go. And very soon they will have to pack up and go. So they think somehow by issuing these threats and launching these attacks on the CCJ, that somehow they can influence the court to rule in a particular manner. And what is heartening to some extent is that many supporters of them as well, I'm seeing saying to them, that you were crossing the line. You were crossing the line by attacking the very court that you celebrated when it ruled on the third term. You celebrated that. And now you want to attack them.
And to disrespect a court, I mean, every citizen or a lot of citizens have had matters in the court before, whether it be civil, criminal, whatever the case, constitutional, whatever. And they may not like the outcome of the case, and that is why you have an appropriate process to appeal. So, but at no point in time do we ever disrespect the court to say that, or issue threats to say that if you don't do as we want you to do, that you are basically going to go in an annihilation. Because
yeah,
that is what
one of the things I wanted to raise, because they're confusing their own people, and there's a belief among their supporters that our sovereignty is being attacked, and all these outside bodies are trying to do harm to Guyana. And I wanted to go back because Imran Khan and all these people are talking about jurisdiction, but the Constitution of Guyana is supreme. And Article 123(4) makes provision for the Parliament of Guyana to establish a court of appeal inside Guyana or any part of the Caribbean to be the final court of appeal for Guyana. It also then goes on to say, as subclause 5, that where a court referred to is established and becomes the final court of appeal for Guyana, such court will remain the final court of appeal for Guyana unless Parliament, by a vote of 2/3 of elected members, makes provision for Guyana to withdraw from such a court. So this was passed in this amendment of the Constitution was done in 2001. And in 2004, the Caribbean Court of Justice Act was brought into being, and it was supported, as you said in the beginning, Eddy, supported unanimously by the House, which included in 2001, the PVPC in government, the PNCR at that time, and as well as the United Force. So it was a unanimous decision. And so this whole, they are accusing the CCG of engineering a position, which is extraordinarily dangerous. But in fact, the ones who are trying to use brainwashing, basically, they're trying to brainwash their supporters to believe that they're being wronged. They're trying to brainwash their supporters that the PVP has rigged the elections. And they're also creating a psychology of victimology, that the whole world is against us as PNCR and APNU-AFC. And it's a very emotive appeal, I must say. And of course, we know where this can lead to if they don't accept the results. So, I mean, I think that the irony for me is listening to who is going out, who they're sending out, who are the bulldogs they're sending out to do this nasty work. Nagamutu, AFC, Ramjatan, AFC, Kathy Hughes, AFC. Who am I forgetting? Imran Khan, is that AFC?
Yes.
So 4 FC doing the dirty work for the PNC. And then you have, of course, Aubrey Norton, who after the 2012 PNC Congress, with him, Solomon Sharma and Kisoon were literally thrown out of the Congress because they accused the PNC of rigging the elections. And so Aubrey has been dusted off because he was put aside because he was thought to be not compliant with Granger. He's now been dusted off, brought back, and is out there mouthing all sorts of things and accusing the PPP outrageous. I mean, when they talk about, they started out, remember, Eddy, in 2004, they were talking about 200 Afro-Guyanese killed. Then by 2008 and 2011, it went up to 400. And then it kind of stuck at 400 until the last month.
Gone to 1,400.
Huh? It's not 1,400.
It was 500,000.
Yeah, if you listen to the vol, it's 500,000.
It's five, yeah.
I mean, we know the PNC is not good at mathematics, and I have called what Lowenfield did mathematical wizardry. And I still believe because it's wizardry. There's no way scientific, logically, or mathematically you can explain it. And it's the same thing that they're going out emotionally trying to rev up their supporters. And I think that people this process has been so long, it's about 124 days now, that people's lives, the COVID, the economic situation, that people want to get back to some level of stability. And so I'm not sure whether they will be able to mobilize the way they've done before, but certainly the fact that, I mean, right-thinking people, and I think the majority of Guyanese are level-headed, they are very politically conscious, whether they are for PDP, APNU, or anybody else, but they have a capacity to examine situations and to understand. And therefore, I think that a lot of the people in the country, particularly the APNU supporters, are saying, "How this doesn't make sense? How come everybody is saying that this thing happened to the elections, and how come only Granger isn't seeing this?" Now, of course, they may say they want to stay in government forever, but that is not going to have the same kind of emotive issues, because, of course, what people have seen too is that their high lifestyle, and that the ordinary people have not done well under APNU at all, particularly their supporters. Not only our supporters, but their supporters have been neglected badly. And I think all that is coming home to roost now with the APNU-AFC. Not only caused them to lose the election, but has lost their momentum right now. That's where the desperation is coming in.
But when all said and done, the long and short of all of this is that, I mean, while we want the public to understand the reason for the Caribbean Court of the appeal to the Caribbean Court of Justice, and Sonia, you may be in a better position than I am to maybe explain the rationale behind going to the court, because the APNU-AFC is spreading their propaganda, trying to give the impression that the PPP somehow have a problem with valid votes. You're in a better position to explain that than I am, and I guess Gail, because of your legal training. But when all is said and done with this process, it goes right back into the laps of the commission to determine or to make that declaration. So maybe, Sonia, you can maybe enlighten the population in terms of why we were at the CCJ in the first place, and whether or not there is any relationship between the CCJ ruling tomorrow and the declaration from GCOM.
Well, we are at the CCJ because the applicants felt that the Court of Appeal does not have exercise a jurisdiction it did not have, which in it sought to interpret a portion of the Constitution that is not captured on the section or on the Article 177.4. That's one. Two, I believe as a precautionary measure, so as no voter is disenfranchised. And three, of course, we have to preserve the paramountcy of our Constitution, because you cannot, on the whims and fancies of any party, take to the court to go and interpret the Constitution, and not only interpret the Constitution, because the Court of Appeal would have some jurisdiction to interpret the Constitution, but not to interpret the Constitution whereby you will go and insert a word into the Constitution. And what you are doing there basically is you are inserting a word based upon an ordinary legislation. So what I am saying is that the Court of Appeal exercised, again, a jurisdiction it did not have. Why we're going to the CCJ is because the CCJ has the right, as our final court, to say or to preserve, again, the paramountcy of our Constitution, and to say and to speak on the issue of jurisdiction. Now, I'm not preempting what the CCJ will rule tomorrow. I'm saying that the applicant is of the opinion that the Court of Appeal did not have jurisdiction, and based on that, or that the Court of Appeal exceeded its jurisdiction, and based upon that, it had the right to, they had the right to appeal to the CCJ. Now, regardless of how the CCJ rules, whether the CCJ will rule and say that the Court of Appeal had no jurisdiction or it had jurisdiction to do what it did, it does not take away from the fact that at the end of the day, it is for the commission at GCOM to make a declaration that is consistent with the recount results. And we would have seen the chairwoman issue a letter on the 16th of June, whereby she made it very clear as to what she was asking or requesting the CEO to do. And it was not outside of his function, it was what his function was. That is, you go and you prepare a report that is in conformity with Section 96 of the RPA, whereby you are to allocate the seats as per the recount results for each party or for the respective parties. And I think that was made quite clear in that letter. Now it goes back, but however the CCJ rules, it goes back to the chairwoman, and it's all in the chairwoman's hands because she is the casting vote for the 7-member commission.
Thanks, Sonia. Yeah, go ahead, Gail. I see you're coming in here to add your bit.
No, I mean, I think that whichever way it goes, I mean, it's important what happens tomorrow for many reasons, whichever way the CCJ rules. But in terms of where we're going after that, because if they rule we don't have jurisdiction, we're still back at GCOM. If they rule they have jurisdiction, we're still back at GCOM. It's just that there may be certain differences in what they say and how the situation will be managed, but we're back at GCOM. And we're back at Article 162, 1A and B, that gives the commission the power to make decisions. And as Sonia said, the Chief Justice ruled that, Claudette Singh, as a retired justice, put in writing in a statement why the commission could not investigate these claims of irregularities and anomalies, and that they did not have jurisdictional powers, etc. That had to be dealt with through an election petition. Further, as Sonia said, she went on June the 16th and requested the recount results. These are the certified recounts. So that whatever happens tomorrow, I think will be very important for many reasons, but it isn't going to interfere with the GCOM coming and making a declaration. And it depends whether, how soon the Claudette Singh calls a meeting and the actual meeting. Now, there are concerns in the society. I suppose Lowenfield doesn't obey, like he didn't before. On June the 13th, he brought the first report where he did present the certified results of the recount, but then he did his wizardry, and for each region he deducted and added and subtracted votes, and came up with disappearing 275,000 voters. And then, of course, on June the 23rd, in the midst of a stay of execution by the court, he then presented another finding to the chairperson where he reduced the numbers from 275,000 to 115,000. There's concern about suppose he doesn't obey. Suppose he says to her, here's my June 23rd report, take it or leave it. APNU got 176,000 odd votes, and the PB under the Constitution has the powers to remedy and where they, so people can see that particularly that the Elections Commission will have such functions connected with or relating to the registration, etc., of electors or the conduct of elections, etc. And then you come to B, shall issue such instructions and take such action as appear to it necessary or expedient to ensure impartiality, fairness, and compliance with the provisions of the Constitution and any act of Parliament, and etc. So there's nothing to impede GCOM from doing what it's supposed to do at this time. And therefore, the fact that Lowenfield in the June 13th report actually included the tabulation of the 10 regions, both the general and the regional results. He did present that, as far as I understand, with his summary sheets, the observation sheets. that in fact GCOM has received the certified results and the tabulation, and therefore it is now the calculation of the seats. And therefore GCOM, in my mind, can proceed to make the declaration, because the first thing is the declaration of which party won, got the single largest block of votes, and that has been traditionally how it's been, that the chairman of the Elections Commission announces, I'm announcing the results, so many votes for each party, and the party with the largest single block of votes is now the president of the country. And that's what has been done up to 2015. What comes subsequently, usually a couple of days later, is the seat calculations, the breakdown of the seats. It's not been often in my memory that the seat allocation comes the same time as the announcement of the declaration. And so I could be wrong in my memory, but the seat allocations are for the National Assembly, the geographic seats and the national top-up, as well as the seat allocation for each of the 10 regions, because there are 10 RDCs. So we have to know how many seats we've got. And remember, in Region 8, it's very close. You know, I don't know how they're going to divide up that person. In Region 7, it was also in terms of if you add up our votes and the opposition parties, the difference between the APNU and AFC in Region 7 is only about 200 votes, 300 votes. So the seat allocation, the region is very important because, of course, that's where you have the next tier of government that runs the country in the next 5 years. And so that declaration has to come. And it doesn't have to come, in my memory, at the same time as the declaration of the president, because it is the president, of course, who names his ministers and names his MPs. But the GCOM itself can do the calculations of the number of seats once they have the tabulations of the results. And so they can rectify that. That is not rocket science. It is not, and if Lowenfield, for example, doesn't go to the meeting, I don't know if they've served on him yet, the charges against him, the private charges against him. And I don't know whether he'll want to appear at a GCOM meeting. These are all things for conjecture and speculation. But were all these scenarios that could happen, it is still within the power of GCOM and within the power of the chairman, who has the deciding vote, to be able to rectify this situation and remedy it in the interests of fairness and justice. She has the power to do that. And so I still feel that I hope that, I know that part of the intimidation of APNU-AFC is to try to not only intimidate the CCJ and everybody else, but I'm sure that they are not wasting time trying to intimidate Claudette Singh. And as I've said in other programs, if that is so, then I hope that she's remembering, I hope she holds in her mind that she is not alone. She has the support of the Commonwealth countries, the Organization of American States, that's about 80 odd countries in the world, the Caribbean countries, another 17 countries. She has the support of the US, the Canadian, British, the Norwegian government, etc. She has the support of the international organizations which are highly reputable, such as the Carter Center and the Elders, for example, just to name two. She has the support of the local civil society in the main. She has the support of all the opposition parties. She is in a very formidable position. She's in a very strong position. She's not alone. And I'm saying specifically that I hope she know, because I know the PNC, just like they're trying to bully the CCJ, they're trying to bully everybody in this country. And so I'm hoping that she keeps in her mind that, in fact, the power that she holds in her hand, not only legally, constitutionally, but in terms of confidence of various very powerful organizations in the world and countries that are saying to her, do what is right. And the thing that is right is the certified recount, statements of recount.
I just wanted
for she to go against that. I'm sorry for her. because then she will be treated like a pariah by everybody. And I don't think a woman of a reputation wants to go down that road and leave that legacy. But Sonia might know better.
No, as a matter of fact, I was about to add to what you have said, Comrade Gail, and that is that the numbers that were presented by Lowenfield in his first report were the correct numbers.
Yeah.
And what the chairwoman would have done in her decision that she gave in the advisory in the letter that she produced as the press release for GCOM, she would have given several reasons and legal reasons why it is that the commission and GCOM and the CEO could not deal with the validity of an election. Therefore, they could only deal with what the numbers coming out of the recount and from E-Day.
Yeah.
And that was already said and done by her. So I am quite firm in my mind that she does know where it is that she's going and what is the right path. So it is only for her to take that path now, to bring that path really to finality.
Yeah.
You touched on a very, very important issue there, Comrade Gail. But before I do that, I just want to probably drop this picture in here before I pick you up on that for us to expound a little. And this table that I'm showing here is exactly what Lowenfield submitted in his report.
Yeah.
And if you look at the very last...
This is the June 13th, the June 13th one, yeah.
Yes, if you look at the very last column here, and I'll probably highlight it here, you will see what is written here.
Valid.
Total valid votes cast. This is what he submitted in that report. But later he came back and he came up with all sorts of fancy numbers and so forth. But you talked about Lowenfield not wanting to do the right thing and presenting all these fraudulent numbers and so forth. You also touched on the fact that he may not want to show up at the court where he's facing currently three private criminal charges for electoral fraud. I'm not too familiar if that is the exact charge. So you may be able to help me out. I think it has something to do with public office.
Yes, it is an intent to defraud. That's where the criminal offense, yes.
But the thing is, I'm seeing now and the abuse of the state media where the Guyana Chronicle has an advertisement saying to Mr. Lowenfield, we have your back, signed by quote-unquote Guyanese around the world. I suspect it's the tree in the basement over there, Rickford Work, Mark Benchcop, and Karen Holland, those three guys who, two of them who fled Guyana on the Granger, by the way, and went overseas to live, Karen Holland and Mark Benchcop. Maybe the three of them are the Guyanese around the world. But if he fails to go, if I wonder if these people are going to stand with him when he's jailed for trying to steal an election. And Sonia, I maybe ask you to come in here to talk a little bit, because I understand that the penalties are not very light when it comes to these offenses.
No, as a matter of fact, the penalties for these are all indictable offenses, and the penalties for these offenses, and I think it's three: it's conspiracy, it's also the intent to defraud, etc. They all can go to a maximum of life imprisonment, and that is not something to be taken lightly at all. So for him to be evading service, he's really doing a disservice and an injustice to himself. Because quite frankly, if he is saying, as he's always said, he's acted within the confines of the Constitution, and we all know, us right-thinking Guyanese all know that he did not act within the confines of the Constitution. But if he wants to believe that, and he wants the country to believe that, why not present yourself to the court and go through the process? This is not something to take lightly, as I said before, and the maximum sentence is life imprisonment. So I do hope that he understands what he's facing.
Thank you very much. I want us to examine a few other issues, because apart from the attempts at bullying the CCJ, apart from the attempts at trying to intimidate the court and trying to indirectly tell the court that this is what we want you to do and so forth, you have another favorite line of the coalition, and that of sovereignty, totally ignoring the fact that Guyana would have signed on to a number of treaties around the world. And this, Gail, you would know more than any one of us. You've been around government for so many years, and you would be aware of so many treaties that you would have signed on to. But every time someone stands on the side of democracy, you're hearing the coalition singing, oh, we're a sovereign country. Do not interfere. Do not get involved. Let us sort our problems out. Totally ignoring the fact that we're living in a global village and we're interconnected. Our problems will have impact, negative impacts, not just for us, but for the Caribbean and the wider world. And what is interesting, in the height of all this singing about sovereignty and calling for non-interference, one of their very own, in the person of Parag would have spoken and say, hey, you guys need to calm down. You can't just want to cry sovereignty and cry independence when things are not going your way, but when you're in trouble with somebody else, you want the world to support you. Gail, I'm going to start with you here on this particular issue.
Well, Greenwich words were said on the eve of us going to the ICJ. And he's very well aware of the efforts that had to be made to get support in the region, in Latin America and the Caribbean, and support at the United Nations level. It took several years to be able to get the Secretary General to agree that the Guyana-Venezuela border controversy should go to the ICJ. And so I think Greenwich is very familiar with why he had to say those words, because here you are dependent on support from countries to help you to get support to the United Nations. And all of a sudden, those same countries, you're turning around and saying, sovereignty, you don't interfere in our internal affairs, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm not surprised by what he said, because this could have an impact too on the kind of behavior at the ICJ. But this is none of this, when Burnham was around, a lot of there was the attack on other countries. Once you criticize the PNC, there was then, you weren't supposed to criticize the PNC. They're somehow born with some special gift from the higher ups to make them impervious to criticism and unwilling to take it. And so some of this mentality has come down through the years. The issue, though, of course, is that the world in 1970s and 80s is different than today. In those days, there were dictatorships in Latin America and Caribbean in many countries. And it was by the 80s, we were happily, after struggling alone for so long, to get support from countries which had traditionally been against the PPP and administrations against the PPP to support the struggle for free and fair elections. And that world that started evolving in the 80s by the world showing it was not tolerant any longer of dictatorships and undemocratic regimes and so on, has, with its own foibles and its own weaknesses today in terms of human rights and in terms of democracy, the world is less tolerant today of accepting rogue countries and pariah states than, say, even 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And so the APNU is going against the tide. They're actually, it's like a boat going up a rapid instead of coming down, following the current of the water. It's going against all the current. And so they do not, I think, I can't sometimes believe that the people like Granger and so on are not aware and don't understand this, but they're willing to be exploitative. They're willing to be opportunistic. For one reason only. They believe that the reins of government belong to them. They believe that they have, and remember when Granger was sworn in 2015, they quoted from the Psalms that it was, this was the day that the Lord had anointed. And if you're saying this is the day that the Lord had anointed, you're being sworn in as president, what are you telling the people? And so this messianic behavior of Granger has always bothered me, and to me it is showing itself now in the kind of statements he makes. They feel it is a God-given right that they have, and so they're willing to do anything to get it and to hold on to power. And I think they've got they've had a struggle they never thought they would have had. They thought that this would have been easy. You would have had 2020 elections. You would have had Felix in charge of citizenship and immigration and registration. You would have had Lowenfield in place. You would have had a house-to-house registration. And by then you would have had a completely new list. And we know what that list would have looked like. But they got a surprise. They got a no confidence motion that threw all the different strategies into confusion. And then, of course, they have been countermanded at each stage. March the 6th, March the 13th. Again, recently with the CCJ. And so they recognize, I think, that their days are coming to an end, but you know, it's whether, as the T.S. Eliot, the poet, says, do you go out with a whimper or do you go out with a bang? And so Hoyt in 92 faced a situation where he had to decide, do you accept defeat? Do you concede? And so Hoyt did that in 2015. Of course, after he did that, they nearly killed him in Congress Place. They had teams of people, you know, calling him a traitor. Granger does not like Hoyt because Hoyt conceded that he'd lost the elections in 92. Then you have the second transition with Ramatar, where President Ramatar, with all the problems of only 4,500 votes, less than 1% difference and no recount, his request to recount twice were denied by Dr. Sturge Valley and the GCOM. 4,500 votes. Nevertheless, President Ramatar, when he realized that Sturge Valley was going ahead, and as Lowenfield said, you know, the fraudulent statements of poll that we had found and everything else, that nothing could prevent the APNU-AFC victory. And so President Ramatar also put out a statement and conceded. The example of whether we're a democratic nation or not is not just the will of the people being respected in terms of the vote. It is also the will of the people being respected by the leaders of the country, and particularly the outgoing president and the incoming president. And Lowenfield has showed a level of dictatorial attitude almost. He's playing games with people's mind. He talks about, oh, you know, I can't concede because I don't know the results. There's been no declaration. That is technical nonsense. When Hoyt declared it was immediate, and imagine 92. Imagine 92 where all the facilities weren't available. 92 was October the 5th was the election. October the 7th, you had the results. October the 7th was the results. And Mr. Hoyt on October the 7th, after the results, accepted and told his supporters, we have to accept. We will choose the election petition. Mr. Ramatar in May, the 11th was the elections. On the 15th of May, the election results came out. And Mr. Ramatar, as president, agreed and said, look, it's a very painful thing. We called for a recount. We didn't get it. This is controversial, but we accept we will go to election petition. What is so difficult about Mr. Granger doing this? He doesn't have to wait. We've gone through, his party's been defeated 3 times. No, I should say 5 times. Let me go through it just for fun. Sorry, Sonia. He's lost at the 20, well, we'll give him 2015. It was 4,500 and he could live on that for his legacy that he was actually able to win an election with less than 1%. But 2016, he lost the local government elections by about 28,000 votes. He lost the local government 2018 elections by about 47,000 votes. Well, don't even talk about AFC. They were beaten by 113,000 votes in this country. They just shouldn't even exist after that. Then you have the no confidence motion. They get defeated there. They then get defeated on March the 2nd. And so by March the 6th, they know they've lost. And then you have the recount, June the 9th. I mean, how many more times? It's like being in a boxing ring and you keep getting punched all the time. You're falling down on the ground, you're getting up again. I mean, they have lost. How much more do they want to be told that they've lost?
Well, that's because, you see, the thing is here, I suspect, is that somehow when you spoke about Granger felt somehow in 2015 that he was the anointed one, that he's the one for Guyana. And then there is this belief in the PNC and the APNU-AFC camp that they are the ones that must run Guyana, regardless of what. Whether the people want you or not, they must be in charge of the country. And that is not how democracies work. Democracies don't work like that. It is the will of the people is one of the most fundamental pillars of democracy. The people determine who governs. And if the people don't want you, then you can't run the country. And it's as simple as that. Somehow Mr. Granger feels, and because he's living in a bubble, he feels that what happened in 2015, he won the election despite the concerns, that victory, quote unquote, should remain. There should be nothing else, regardless of how people vote. That shouldn't change. He should remain running the country. So if you can't get the people's vote, then you bully them. Then you bully the parties that are involved in the elections, whether they win or not. Then you bully every other institution that tries to uphold democracy. You bully every other leader that tries to say, hey, what you're doing is wrong, you've lost the elections, time to walk. Because that's the PNC. And you would know more than I do, Gail, that that's the nature of the PNC, that they bully their way for everything.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, Sonia, you are young people coming up.
I was about to say that I don't.
So you young people coming up, this is all kind of shock. But I'll let Sonia go ahead.
Well, I don't recall much of what was taking place in the early 80s. I do recall the violence after.
You were very young there, my dear. You were very
But in
young,
1992, in 1992, I do recall that because I'm from Essequibo, and I do recall that in 1992 when the PPPC won the elections, and by the way, that was the year that the Carter Center, that the opposition and the government invited the Carter Center to be a part and parcel of the elections, to have free and transparent elections. The same Carter Center that this government, or not even government, the incumbent is seeking to keep out. I don't recall, but I do recall the violence. But back to sovereignty. In 2015, when they would have won and you would have had all the input from the international community, our sovereignty was not being interfered with then.
Right.
I suppose because, of course, they were the ones who were benefiting. Our sovereignty is not dependent upon an international community coming in to say, it's not interference to come in and say, look, you have signed on to the OAS, to CARICOM, to the UN, the foundation of which for all of these organizations are democratic principles. You are signatories to those. You are now coming to say that you don't have a voice, we don't have a voice here, we are interfering because you are sovereign. Your sovereignty in the first place and your independence is what made you became a signatory to these treaties. And I think that is what is important for them to understand. They don't seem to understand. They think that they can just, as the rule of law, disregard and disrespect everything that is of value to the Guyanese.
You know, the contradiction, Sonia, is that the Canadians and so on created the Lima group to do with Venezuela, when of course Venezuela has been facing sanctions from the US, etc. And Guyana was part of that grouping. Guyana was invited to be part of the Lima group. Guyana attended, Mr. Greenwich and others attended. where positions were taken critical of Maduro's government and supporting the sanctions. And so this contradiction is, okay, we can call for sanctions on another country, or we can be part of a larger grouping that calls for sanctions on another country, but no one must do that to us. And as you correctly said, we are a signatory to many international treaties. In fact, we are, based on those treaties that we've signed, we have to give reports, periodic reports, whether it's to the human rights, whether it's to climate change, whether it is to maritime laws, etc., and of course with CARICOM. But we have to, it's part of our responsibility as part of the global democracy, a global democratic fold, that we uphold these treaties that we've signed on to. And that in fact, this government has been rather delinquent about our reporting before these bodies. And of course, but the issue is that they do not feel fundamentally that they need to. And of course, the ordinary man in the street needs to understand this a bit, because we have talked on this program before about sanctions. For the ordinary person on the street, they say, what's all this talk about sovereignty? Let's get this thing over, let's get back to our lives and stuff like that. And so whoever gets in, let's get back to normal. A lot of people are frustrated. But the point is, for people may not understand that if there are sanctions, it's going to affect trade. It's going to affect the importation of goods that come into the country that people rely on. And so when they chant all this thing about sovereignty, they're really, as they say, misleading the people and making people feel as if somehow as a country we can exist in isolation from the rest of the world, which we can't, not only from the legal and the international areas, but also just from a simple survival thing of money, of food. And while all this is going on, of course, is that the foreign exchange in Guyana has, the value of our dollar has gone down. So I think at one time last week it was 2.42.
It was
a dollar. Yes. So the cost of living is increasing for our people. And so what's this talk about sovereignty? We've got to pay rent. We've got to have transportation. We have to feed our children. And so more and more the economic crunch and the impact without sanctions is being felt. And if they go in the direction which they should not, and we will do everything to prevent them from going in that undemocratic direction, is that who will suffer is the ordinary Guyanese people, whether they're living in Moruca, whether they're living in Yacarinta, whether in Bartica, whether Georgetown South or Essequibo, anyway, it's the people of this country who will suffer. And their supporters and our supporters and anyone else in between. And this is what the PNC is, reckless, irresponsible behavior in terms of how they're treating the nation. When Granger says, oh, I will walk through water for Guyana, I will walk through all the alleyways for Guyana, this nonsense he talked on, I think it was his June 29th program with Ben Schop. I will do everything for Guyana. And yet he will not do what is right as of now for Guyana. And accept that he lost and that he can fight another day. He may not be the leader in 2025, but they can put themselves in order and try to win the elections in 2025. That's their right. But you know, they're taking our country through some very treacherous paths. And that is where we go back to GCOM. All of this circulates around GCOM. GCOM does what it's supposed to do, which is right to do according to the Constitution. Then we'll see how Mr. Granger behaves and his party. We have an idea how they might, and there are risks, but they also may surprise all of us and just accept they burnt all their bridges and time to conform with reality, you know. But the prospects look positive in terms of Wednesday, Thursday, if GCOM does what is right. But there's always risk, and we have to watch out for the risk and be prepared to deal with them as we dealt with them between March the 2nd right through to now.
The level of craziness escalates every day, so I wouldn't be surprised if there is something new up their sleeves. I can't preempt what the Caribbean Court of Justice would rule, but submissions were there, and I do believe submissions were quite sound for the applicant. if I may say so myself. But that's just my opinion. But again, GCOM holds the power, the commission holds the power, and the commission does have a lot of power in terms of what it can and cannot accept, and who it can and cannot accept it from. So if Lowenfield feels that he will go back and get another report with some other fictitious or falsified numbers and bring it to the commission can definitely act and take this down the right path. Yeah. And I'm going to hope that they do that.
All right. Both Gail, Teixeira, Sonia, Parag, I want to thank both of you for joining me this evening. I just want to say quickly before we close, as I had adopted to some extent the words of Joe Hamilton, the way he ends his program is to say that this can only end one way, where democracy will win at the end of this. The will of the people will not be taken lightly. The will of the people will succeed, and Dr. Irfan Ali will be sworn in as the 9th executive president of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, and the People's Progressive Party will form the next government. The PPP has a plan that, to take this country forward. Our people are suffering, our economy is in really bad shape. We have a pandemic on our hands that National COVID Task Force seems to have been mishandling from the inception. And there are so many things to take care of to move our country forward, to put our people's lives back to some level of normalcy. So this will definitely come to an end very soon. I want to also say to not only supporters of the PPP, but to all Guyanese to remain calm, to remain vigilant and focus on facts. Don't forget, APNU got 217,920, a difference of 15,416. Basic mathematics for a primary school child will know that the greater amount there is 236,000. Therefore, the PPP has won the elections. All the lies and propaganda about vote impersonation, dead people, as Damna said, the people got up and go and vote and then went back to rest and so on. They haven't been able to produce a single shred of evidence. By the way, I saw an article in the Guyana Chronicle saying, big headline, coalition makes public, I think, death certificates. But all they did is to list some names with not a single photo of a certificate. So the fact of the matter is they've been trying to fool the people. They've lost the elections. They failed. They failed this nation from 2015 right up until now, and they have lost the election. The people voted them out. So I want to encourage people across the country, don't get carried away. Don't be dragged into the propaganda and the narrow ambition of a small group who wants to hold on to power. Let us await the court ruling, and like both of you said, GCOM, the authority is with GCOM to make a determination. The chair of GCOM has made her position clear both in the letter to Lowenfield and her submissions to the court. GCOM cannot invalidate votes. So Granger and his gang can do the right thing. That is to take all the evidence, quote unquote, that they have and file an election petition after a declaration, and that declaration is gazetted. Again, I thank both of you for joining me this evening, and to our viewers, we want to say thanks for being part of the program. Tomorrow is a big day, I think, for all Guyanese. You're waiting, anticipating that ruling. But again, like you guys said, the ruling has really no relationship whatsoever with the declaration that has to be made by GCOM. Thanks, guys, for joining me this evening.
All right. Thank you, Eddy.
Good night.
Good evening, viewers.
Good night, Sonia.
Good evening, Comrade Gail.
Good evening there. Bye, Eddy.
Bye.